Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to another 2021 Project Orchids video. Now we're running update 2s at the moment in September, of which there will be 4 videos. One you've already had, which was the Oncidium types, and this will be part 2 effectively, which is the Dendrobiums. And that leaves us part 3, the Cattleya Alliance, and then part 4 is the others, assorted. So that's what's left to go. So we'll get this one underway. We have introduced a new Dendrobium, and quite honestly, off the top of my head, I can't remember it was because we lost one or because I only chose 5. But anyway, it was brought up to 6 in the last round of updates, update 1. And as usual with the Project Orchids videos, near the front of the video will be a pop-up card which will actually take you to the previous update for the part we're running, which is the Dendrobium. So you could get to go and look at that if you wish to do so. And then the playlist, which has got all of them in, will be at the end of the video, if you want to go and see any of the others, shall we say. Okay, so let's get going with the 6 Dendrobiums. Okay, first up is this primulinum variety Laos with a question mark on the end. I'm still dubious because the canes are not as long as they should be. But at this point, you know, we're getting into the growing season here. You know, we've got our new growths and there's been some root activity. So at this stage of the game, I'm reasonably pleased with the plant. What I need from this, which I would have said back in June, is that I need the latest 2 growths to progress to full-size canes. Now, I don't know whether they will. You know, they haven't long started at this point, quite honestly. They started a bit late in the season, but then I haven't had the plant that long. But the old canes just don't look long enough for me. You know, we shall see. I may have been sold a duff budgie. Look that up. But at the end of the day, it's a nice plant, it's a healthy plant, and, you know, that is most of what you want from a plant. Being the right one is also what you want, but a nice healthy one, even if it's not the right one and we find out what it is later, it's still nice to have a nice healthy plant. So let's see what happened with that one. Okay, last time we looked at this one, we had our 2 nice new growths pushing out. I am now getting quite concerned that this isn't what it was sold as, simply because this plant has a reasonable root system. Its oldest leafless canes, of which there are quite a few, are not very large, and the 2 canes I've grown this year, which have now stopped growing, they both have their terminal leaf, are nowhere near the full size they should be for this plant. So I'm still not absolutely certain this is what it says, what it's supposed to be. But there's no way we're going to find out until it blooms. It's as simple as that. So as far as the progress of this plant is concerned this year, it's finished. You know, and it's, it's only just September, which is a trifle worrying because I'd have expected these canes to grow on a bit longer. But anyway, as far as the health of the plant is concerned, there are no issues whatsoever. It's got roots, it's grown new ones, it's fine, and it's got a nice healthy new set of canes with nice healthy leaves on them. So whether we get any blooms next year or not, I don't know. I have no idea. But until I get some blooms, I'm not going to be able to tell whether I really have got what I paid for. And if not, I can't exactly go back and have a chat about it. This guy had come over from the Far East to Malvern, so he was pretty safe, wasn't he? Anyway, we shall see. I mean, hopefully the guy in good faith, you know, he absolutely said, nope, that's definitely the variety with the yellow centre. It'll be fine, sort of thing. As I said, I'll have no comeback. We shall see, and that's all I can say with this one. We wait for blooms. Now, we were privileged back in June because this one was in bloom. The two blooms centre and left had been open some considerable time and were fading, and the bloom on the right had recently opened, and these last a long time. Black hair types blooms last a long time. You can almost guarantee that across all the species. It's strange actually, this particular part 2, the Dendrobiums, has got a high percentage of species, but then I suppose that's my thing, isn't it? Dendrobiums, I suppose. Anyway, what we had here was a new growth sort of pushing on. We had a cane in bloom. It was still in its original pot as it came to me, on the grounds that the bark it's in is fine. It had signs of some root activity, pretty healthy plant, and 3 lovely blooms. The blooms are large on this plant, so when they're out they make the plant look relatively small, when in fact, as you can see, it's way up above the thermostat there. It's a large plant. So all I could hope for with this is for new growths and more roots. I had no plans on repotting it. Mind you, you know what I'm like, I can change my mind. So we better have a look and see what happened through the growing season. Did I repot? Did we get more roots? Now, this next one is one of the plants that's difficult because it's so tall. As part of the video, I take a still that gets carried forward to the next video, if you see what I mean. That becomes the bit that we look at prior to the video clip, if you see what I mean, that still. And it's getting difficult to get stills on some of them because they're so big and they get a bit jumbled up with other things. Tough. It's a nice big healthy plant, so be it. Now, last time we looked at this one we had blooms. Those have gone now. They lasted a very long time. I was well pleased with that. But what we've got as far as progress is concerned is this new cane here, which is pushed on, is now greater in height than the canes I've already got, and is still growing. So this is going to be a very large, strong cane, which will push a lot more strength into this plant basically. This is quite an old cane, relatively slim. This is even older and even slimmer. This is a division, so there's no small canes. You know, there's only the canes that were there when it was divided from the mother plant. This is a good sized cane, and that's the one that bloomed. And now we're growing a better cane than anything we've already got. Now, this type of Dendrobium is perfectly capable of blooming again on a cane that already has. So you never know where blooms are going to come on these. It's unlikely to bloom on this small one. It could possibly bloom again on here, but maybe not, because this cane is obviously older than anything else on the plant. This is the one that recently bloomed. This may have another go from lower down. As I say, you can never tell with these. And then at some point next year, I would suggest, this latest growth will bloom. That latest cane is going to bloom. So this one's doing okay, it's fine. It's one of the few plants that I've had a while now that I haven't repotted. And I'm still not going to repot it because it's in perfectly good bark. There's just no need to disturb that plant. So this plant is going to stay in that pot until we get another new growth and the subsequent set of roots starting. So that way I can at least maintain the best part of the root system I've already got, which is pretty good. I mean, you can see that there's a lot of roots down in that pot. As soon as you start digging around, you find white roots. So I'm happy that it can stay in that pot until the next new growth and the new roots start, which I would suggest is going to be next year. But we've still got one cane still growing, which is good. So as far as the growing season is concerned with this plant, it is still growing, as opposed to the previous one, which has stopped. So this one's doing okay. Pleased with this one. Right, back in June then, we had a plant in a bucket. I said all along from the point I actually got this plant that the pot was too big. Maybe not. I mean, that is debatable. It is an opinion. You know, if you've got a plant that is expected to go absolutely mad and can double in size in a season, then putting it in a big pot makes sense, providing you've got new root growth to actually get into that pot. But anyway, back in June I was thinking, you know, we've got a new growth that's maturing, we've got no sign of any more new growths coming, and if it's going to stop growing for some considerable time, that's a big pot for that existing root system to live in. So I was debating whether whether I should just bite the bullet and get on and repot it, get it in a smaller pot, and at least then I get to look at the roots, because at the moment I haven't got a clue what's going on in that pot. Unlike some other orchids, I can't turn it upside down and lift the pot off, because if I do that, most of the bark will be on the floor. So we don't want to do it with this one. But, you know, it's a reasonably healthy plant. It's not bad. One new growth, two would have been better, maturing, and really I haven't had it long enough to know what it's going to do next. So, well, let's have a look and see what it did next. Now, last time we looked at this one, we had a plant in a bucket. That's since been repotted. So this one is up the front of the queue to get treated with the hippie soap. Firstly, it has got some signs of scale. It's not horrendous, but it's a few leaf joints have got signs of scale. It's been sprayed with my, you know, sort of spot-on treatment, effectively, the systemic that I just let run down in the leaf joints. So the chances are they're dead, but it's got grubby leaves, and they've never come clean. Yeah, you can see they're grubby. So I'm going to give it a good go with the hippie soap. Now, the latest new growth on here is matured, and it's not as large as it should be. Yeah, so it didn't get to the full size it ought to have done. It's finished growing now. No signs of any more new growths yet. So I've got a horrible feeling that having disturbed it, it's now going to stall. But I'm quite happy for it to stall at this time of year and through the winter. It is, after all, a Latoria type, and it's going to object to the lower temperatures in the winter and would probably have stopped growing if it was growing anyway. So, you know, if it's going to stall, now's a good time, and then come the better weather next year, it should burst back into life, and maybe we'll get some blooms. It is possible again that it can bloom on a cane that already has. Now, I've had 2 spikes on here, although one never matured because some clumsy oaf actually broke it, but the other one did actually mature. We did have the blooms, and they are quite spectacular. So I'd be looking forward to those blooms again. I don't know which canes they're going to come from, and I don't know if and when we may see some. But as far as I'm concerned, the plant currently is not growing, and there's no sign of any bloom spikes anywhere. So it's on hold. We'll see what happens. Who knows, when we get to the final update of the year, there may actually be something going on. We'll wait and see. Now, this one, according to others, bearing in mind I haven't had it long, is behaving strangely. Because according to others, once it finishes blooming, or during blooming, new growths push out. And then they carry on pushing out for a while. Well, mine didn't do that. What mine did was started some new growths and pushed them on vigorously and didn't produce any more. So what we had in June was the new growths, which is the main large one sticking out to the right, and then there's one up the back that you can just about see has got 2 leaves on, and another one lower down. I think there were 4 actually altogether, but to all intents and purposes in June it didn't look like it was going to grow that much more, which is odd. You can have a dendrobium stopping at the beginning of the growing season instead of at the end. So it was behaving a little strangely. Not to worry, You know, I mean, this has been grown on from a seedling. It's produced new growths. They've got nice bright green full-size leaves and full-size canes, if not larger than those previously on the plant. So you can't complain about that. It just seems a little odd. And it could be that I just haven't had the plant long enough, and this is what it does. And it's nothing unusual. But anyway, I got this horrible feeling when we get to September it's going to look exactly the same as this. Let's take a look. Right, we could play spot the difference, couldn't we? The difference between last time when we looked at this and this time is next to nothing. All that's actually happened is that the new growths for this year, which are larger, fatter and stronger than any previous growths, that's good. There weren't as many as I was expecting, but all they've done is got a little bit fatter and the leaves have got a little bit darker. And there are no more new growths. So in effect, this is another plant that's finished growing. And I would suggest it's finished early. Now that might be because the new growth started early, or, as some people suggested, you get a set of new growths and while they're still growing on, sort of mid-size, you get a few more. And I didn't get the extra ones. But, you know, the new growths, like this one up the back, are big, fat and strong. Same with this one here, and this one down the bottom. Yeah? And this one out the side. So we've got good strong new growths which gives overall strength to the plant, and because this has been grown on from a seedling, small little pseudobulbs expanding, canes. So it's been grown on, it's growing on well. We will get blooms next year. I don't know how many spikes we're going to get, and after you I know this is going to sound, I haven't had this plant a huge amount of time, but I still am not sure now, talking about this plant, whether the spikes next year will come on this year's growth or the previous year's growth. We'll wait and see, and I'll try and make a note of it this time round because I didn't last time. But anyway, we should see some blooms it's a late spring, this one, late spring, early summer, whatever you want to call it. So it's not an end of winter bloomer, it waits a while. And good numbers of blooms on the spikes and everything. These, quite honestly, these are very easy to grow, but you're going to get a much better blooming on them if they get a reasonable winter rest. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know, but they do like a drop in temperature at night, and they do like brighter light through the days in the winter, especially towards the end of the winter. So, yep, and virtually no water because they're not growing, you know, and obviously no feed because they're not growing. Now, unfortunately at the moment, I can't separate this plant out, which I should do. The best care for this plant now would be to stop feeding it, or give it a trickle now and again, and reduce its water down because it's finished growing for the year. But then it's only September. I normally think about doing that towards the end of October into November, and I wouldn't want to stop watering it this early because with the longer days and the warmer temperatures it's going to shrivel. Yeah, so it needs to keep going in my watering program, although it's not going to do much with any feed that it gets. So that's that one. The new growths are good. Now I've even got one with 2 leaves. Now, that's unusual. It's normally a single leaf on the end of the cane. So that big fat one up the back's got 2. So there we go. And yeah, so we look with this one. Next time we look at this in December, the only thing that's going to have happened is the canes will have shriveled a bit. That's natural for this plant, although they shouldn't shrivel right up. There's a look about them that's acceptable, and anything more than that they need to drop more water. So there won't be much change to this plant when we look at it next time round, and hopefully we won't have lost any leaves because it is deciduous eventually. But you can see all the canes have still got their leaves on here except for the really old tiny ones, and even one of them's got a leaf. So they do hold their leaves a very long time. So that's that one. Okay, this one is progressing as I would expect. of this type of dendrobium to do. It's a winter rester to a degree, but not a severe rester. It doesn't need to. Doesn't need its whatnots frozen off. Not that cold, but it does like much cooler nights in the winter and brighter light if you can do it. Now this hasn't bloomed for me. Effectively, the mother plant died, and this is two kikis, and the two lower canes there are the previous year's growth, and the two canes sticking up in the air are this year's growths so far. You know, so far so good and all that. And they are growing on, and also there's root activity, so it's doing exactly as expected. There's a good boy or girl. Some people do put male and female on orchids, don't they? I don't tend to bother. I just go, oi, hey you, get it together, get some roots, get some new growths and all that stuff. Anyway, this one's in June. This was doing as expected, and for the rest of the season I would expect it to do exactly as expected and push on those two new growths, hopefully larger than the previous year's growths, which are looking okay and have still got their leaves. How long this one holds its leaves, I don't know. I haven't had it long enough, so we will wait and see. Let's see what it did in the growing season. Now this one's doing pretty good. What we've got here is last year's growths, which is, it was possible they may have bloomed, but it's still possible they may bloom next year. And then what we've got are this year's canes, yeah, which are growing on and are still growing. They're still producing leaves, so these are still going to get larger. Love the shine on these leaves when they're new like that. So, and we've grown an extensive root system. Yeah, we've got a very, trouble is if I get it down, it's gone all round the back and everything. Now you're going to go back up there and stay. Yes, jolly good. Make a hole in me, doodah. But during this year, these canes have got fatter. So although they're not growing in length, they're growing in strength. And then you've got the little older canes couple there. It is two plants. Effectively, it was a plant originally which had two kikis, and the plant itself died, and I mounted the two kikis, and they've grown on nicely. So each year so far, each plant has grown one new cane. So here and now here, yeah, two nice new canes. So these will get longer, and probably next time we look at these, end of the year, sort of middle of winter, they will probably be quite a bit fatter. These now won't change anymore. These will stay as they are. The only thing that may change on these is they might start dropping leaves. And in addition to that, maybe we might see some flower buds. Now I've got a feeling this one does bloom relatively early in the year, so obviously we'll be waiting till next year, but so far this hasn't bloomed for me. So I'm still waiting to see these blooms for the first time, and I'm looking forward to it. So we shall see how we go. So an unbloomed plant, but it's a strong plant. It's a strong, healthy plant. So let's see if we can get some bloom. So it doesn't bloom on these two old canes. I would expect it to bloom on these, but because I haven't had it long enough and it hasn't bloomed yet, I don't know its blooming pattern. And it may well be that come the spring, it's these 2-year-old canes that actually bloom. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it's doing okay. I'm well pleased with the progress on that. And as I said, these latest two canes are still growing. And even though when they finish and they get their terminal leaf, as you can see from the lower two, they still carry on getting bigger. So as storage organs, they still progress. So you can see the difference in the thickness in the older canes and the newer ones. So there we go. Doing okay. Well pleased with that one. Now this one has a story. You know, this came from Jeff's, and being a dendrobium, went off to the National Dendrobium Collection. At which point I never expected to ever see it again. Well, here it is. finish the story in a minute. But what we had at the in June, which is, you know, getting into the growing season, not the beginning, but, you know, progressing. What we had here was the tall cane on the left, which has bloomed, the shorter cane in the middle, which has also had one spike on it, been trimmed off, and then we had our little new growth pushing out to the right hand side, which was at that time starting a few new roots. Quite honestly, that's exactly what a dendrobium should be doing. You know, new growth pushing on, and at some point, either not long after starting, halfway up, or when almost finished, a new root system will come to go with that new growth. That's what they do. The only thing you need to find out about your plant is when it does that with the new growth, so that you can predict when is a good time to repot next time round, whenever that might be. As far as this one is concerned, it hasn't long been repotted, and I was pleased that the new growth was pushing out new roots, because it didn't have very good roots on the old plant, you know, what the part of the plant that I actually got. So at this stage of the game, it's sort of behaving itself, you know, nice new growth pushing on. How big it's going to get, we didn't know at this point. But I always go with, you know, with a new plant that's been potted, if the growth actually gets up to the same height as the previous growth, that's okay. We'll live with that. So let's actually see what the growing season actually did for this one. And the last one. And yes, it's another one of those that has just got... Oh, hello? What do you want? Nothing, obviously. Just being nosy. Yes, what we had with this one last time we looked at it was its latest growth was nice and big and strong, with some nice red stripes on the cane. I'll show those when I get in closer in a minute. But that cane had already bloomed, and even the shorter cane, the one that's only half height, that has obviously bloomed in the past. So nursery force grown, basically. You can tell that a mile off when the short canes bloom. And then we had a little new growth coming out to the right hand side. Well, that little new growth is now a very big growth. And it looks absolutely fabulous. It's got beautiful leaves on it, and the leaves are edged with red. Yeah, and that's a trait. If you look at the older canes, you've got the reddish purple veining and that coloration just tinged on the edge of the leaves. So we could still possibly get a spike on here. It is still possible. You can see it's capable of spiking in different places, although this one's done the apex, the first leaf joint and the second leaf joint, so maybe it won't do any more. But it bodes well for this one when it matures, which it hasn't done yet. It's not going to grow any more leaves, but these top two leaves will get a little larger before it finishes, and then it will plump up a bit. It's done its roots, yeah, so it's in a good state to actually give us some blooms, which will be good because I haven't seen the blooms on this yet, so this is a complete unknown. But with its name, I suspect we should get some green in our blooms. It's all in the name, you know. Anyway, good progress there. That new cane I am well pleased with. It's an absolute stonker. Larger than the previous good cane, with more leaves. The leaves start lower down. You know, I've actually got a leaf right down here on this one. Okay, it's only a little one, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 leaves on there, whereas the previous one had 2, 4, 6, 7. So it's a major progression, that new growth, and it's a biggie. So we'll see what the top of that cane produces at the appropriate time, which I don't know, because I haven't seen it bloom. This came from Jeff's collection, and it's an unbloomed plant. I just looked at it and thought, you know, we'll have some of that. And then I couldn't, because it had to go to the National Orchid Collection. And then Marius checked and it wasn't catalogued, so it came back to me again. So there we go. Anyway, unbloomed, and hopefully we will now get a decent spike, if not more than one, on that latest big growth. It should be good. We shall see. Okay, there we go then. That was part 2 of update 2. Excuse me. Part 3 will follow on in the not too distant future, which will be the Cattleyas or Cattleya Alliance, and I'll see you in that one. Again, I hope you enjoy the format of these. I mean, we've been running these Project Orchids for a couple of years now. I think this is probably the 3rd year I've been doing it, and you know, the response to the videos and everything really determines whether I do it again next year. And if I do, then we'll choose a new set of plants for each of the 4 parts. Yeah? And we'll see how it goes. But as I said, it's all geared up to, are they being enjoyed? Are people liking the format and the way they work? Quite honestly, the biggie is the next one. When we get to update 3, which is in fact the final update in December, we will review all of the stills right forward from all of the previous updates. So the initial look, update 1 and update 2, followed by the video for the final part. So we'll review the whole year when we get to December. But we haven't finished September yet, have we? 2 more parts to go. Thanks for watching. See you next time.